Did you know that on the evening of Monday, May 3rd, 1999, the strongest tornado ever recorded on Earth tore through the town of Bridge Creek, Oklahoma? This tornado wasn't just powerful, it was historic. It reached wind speeds of 321 miles per hour, the fastest wind ever measured on the planet. That record was captured by a special mobile Doppler radar just as the tornado hit peak strength. It didn't just break records, it tore apart everything in its path. The day started out like many others in springtime Oklahoma. The Storm Prediction Center had only issued a slight risk for severe weather. That morning, nobody had any idea what was coming. Meteorologists later realized the data had missed a powerful jet stream streak, high in the atmosphere. It came in fast from the west and wasn't picked up by models until it was already overhead. That, combined with warm, humid air rising from the Gulf of Mexico, and a diffused dry line moving across the region created the perfect setup for disaster. But at the time, most people were going about their day as usual. It wasn't until the afternoon that things started to change. Around 3:20 p.m., a small storm started building in southwestern Oklahoma over northeastern Tillman County. It didn't look like much at first, but then it began feeding off the warm surface air and upper-level winds. By 4:15, the National Weather Service had issued a severe thunderstorm warning as the storm moved into Comanche County. Hail the size of golf balls started falling, and the storm was picking up speed. People began to realize this wasn't just another spring storm. By 6:23 p.m., the first signs of real danger appeared. A new tornado touched down just 2 miles south-southwest of Amber, a small town in Grady County. This was tornado number 9, from the supercell storm that had formed hours earlier, but this one was different. Within minutes, it had strengthened to an F-4 tornado and was growing in size. It quickly turned into what's called a wedge tornado, wide, powerful, and deadly. It wasn't long before it reached the town of Bridge Creek, where the worst of the destruction would soon unfold. The tornado reached F-5 strength as it hit Bridge Creek. Homes were not just damaged, they were gone. Entire buildings were lifted from their foundations and scattered like matchsticks. Cars and trucks were thrown hundreds of yards. In one case, a vehicle was tossed nearly a quarter of a mile. The wind speeds inside the tornado were so high that they weren't even measurable by normal radar systems. Mobile Doppler captured that record-breaking 321 miles per hour wind inside the storm, making it the most violent tornado ever measured. Bridge Creek was left unrecognizable. Streets disappeared under piles of debris, trees were shredded, power lines and communication towers collapsed. And through it all, residents were scrambling to survive. The storm was just getting started, and what came next would push emergency systems, communities, and families to their breaking points. After tearing through Bridge Creek with unimaginable force, the tornado continued its deadly path northeast. It was now heading straight for the heavily populated city of Moore. This wasn't a remote storm anymore. This was a direct threat to thousands of lives. As the tornado left Bridge Creek behind around 6:40 p.m., meteorologists at the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma, knew they had something catastrophic on their hands. Veteran forecasters were stunned by the radar images. The tornado's signature was massive, and the debris ball, an area of radar showing flying wreckage, was clear and alarming. It meant the tornado was not only strong, but was actively destroying structures. A tornado emergency was issued for the first time in history. This wasn't just a typical tornado warning. It was a new level of alert. The words used in the warning were clear and terrifying. A violent tornado was on the ground, causing massive destruction and moving toward populated areas. People in the path were told to take shelter immediately and not to wait. By 7 p.m., the tornado was entering the outskirts of Moore. Unlike Bridge Creek, Moore was densely developed. Homes sat side by side, schools, shopping centers, and busy highways filled the landscape, and it was rush hour. Hundreds of cars were stuck in traffic on Interstate 35 as the storm approached. Many people abandoned their vehicles and ran for cover under overpasses or into nearby ditches, hoping to escape the storm. The tornado remained at F-5 strength as it reached Moore. It destroyed entire neighborhoods. Entire blocks were swept clean off their foundations. Schools were flattened, a large portion of a hospital was heavily damaged, a massive natural gas pipeline was struck, and for a short time, officials feared an explosion. A fire station and several emergency buildings were among the many structures lost to the storm. A local news station was broadcasting live throughout the event. Their helicopter pilot Jim Gardner flew over the storm as it moved across Moore, giving viewers a terrifying bird's-eye view of the damage in real time. His voice cracked as he described what he was seeing. Homes leveled, neighborhoods gone, fires burning where houses had once stood. His footage would later become some of the most well-known tornado coverage ever recorded. In neighborhoods like Eastlake Estates and Highland Park, families huddled in closets, bathtubs, and storm shelters as the tornado tore through. Many survived only because they had taken shelter in time. Others weren't as lucky. The winds were too strong, and in some cases, even storm shelters were compromised. The raw power of the tornado exceeded what many homes and buildings were built to withstand. By the time the tornado left Moore, it had been on the ground for more than 30 minutes and had carved a damaged path more than 20 miles long, but it was not done yet. It was still moving, still violent, and still had more destruction ahead as it pushed toward the city of Del City and eventually the outskirts of Oklahoma City. As the tornado exited Moore, it pressed onward toward Del City. It was now around 7:15 in the evening. Though still extremely powerful, its winds had begun to slightly weaken, but it remained a massive, deadly storm. It continued to hold its strength as it moved through more urban areas, expanding the trail of devastation. Del City, located just southeast of downtown Oklahoma City, was heavily impacted. Entire rows of homes were damaged or destroyed. Large trees were uprooted and tossed into roadways, power lines snapped, and transformers exploded, plunging parts of the city into darkness. Emergency services struggled to navigate the debris-strewn streets as residents emerged from their shelters, many in shock at the destruction around them. In this part of the storm's path, the tornado damaged several schools, apartment buildings, and small businesses. A large warehouse collapsed entirely, though thankfully it had been evacuated minutes before the tornado arrived. Vehicles were tossed across parking lots and highways. Some were thrown into buildings or wedged between structures. The Twister's rotation began to wobble as it neared Tinker Air Force Base. The base had been placed on full alert after the tornado emergency was issued. Military aircraft had been moved to safety earlier in the day, but the base's outer areas still sustained damage. Several non-hardened structures near the perimeter were torn apart. Housing units on the edge of the base were hit, though base officials later confirmed there were no fatalities within the installation. As the tornado approached the eastern edge of Oklahoma City, its width was still measured at nearly 1 mile across. Rain-wrapped and difficult to see in the fading light, it remained a serious threat. Weather spotters and storm chasers followed at a safe distance, documenting the storm's continuing power. The tornado's winds were no longer at their earlier peak, but they remained intense enough to collapse homes, snap steel poles, and fling debris over long distances. It moved at around 30 miles per hour, giving people in its path very little time to react. Many relied on news updates, radio reports, and warnings from neighbors to take shelter. At 7:30 in the evening, the tornado's structure began to weaken noticeably. Its core circulation lost some definition, and its winds slowly decreased. Still, it caused damage as far as Choctaw before finally lifting off the ground after being on a continuous rampage for nearly 1 full hour. In total, it had traveled more than 38 miles across central Oklahoma, causing destruction in rural areas, suburbs, and cities alike. Though the tornado had lifted, the crisis was far from over. Emergency workers faced the grim task of searching for survivors, treating the injured, and assessing the full scope of what had just occurred. The worst tornado in Oklahoma history had finally passed, but the scars it left behind would remain for years to come. After the tornado dissipated near Choctaw, emergency crews quickly mobilized across the storm's wide path of destruction. Firefighters, paramedics, and search and rescue teams from multiple counties moved into action. Many had been tracking the storm's movement in real time and were already preparing before it touched down. As darkness fell, they faced collapsed buildings, downed power lines, flooded streets, and the overwhelming task of reaching those trapped beneath debris. The Oklahoma National Guard was activated that same evening. Units were sent to assist with search efforts, traffic control, and delivering supplies. Roads had to be cleared for ambulances and fire trucks to get through. In some neighborhoods, street signs were gone and landmarks had vanished, making navigation almost impossible. Helicopters from news stations and rescue services hovered overhead, shining spotlights onto flattened homes in hopes of finding survivors. Hospitals across Oklahoma City and surrounding towns began receiving the injured shortly after the tornado passed. Emergency rooms were filled with patients suffering from cuts, broken bones, and blunt force trauma. Triage centers were set up near heavily affected neighborhoods to care for those who could not immediately be transported. Medical personnel from outside the area volunteered their services, some driving through the night to help. Thousands of residents were left without homes. Temporary shelters were opened in churches, schools, and community centers. The American Red Cross and local aid organizations provided food, blankets, and emotional support. Survivors spoke in hushed tones, stunned by the destruction. Many had lost family members, neighbors, or close friends. As word of the disaster spread, volunteers poured in from nearby states. Some brought tools and supplies, while others simply offered their time and labor. Neighbors worked side by side, clearing wreckage and searching for missing persons. In the days that followed, rescue operations turned to recovery efforts. Heavy equipment was brought in to remove larger debris and uncover the remains of buildings. Damage assessment teams began documenting the extent of the destruction. Preliminary estimates placed the cost in the billions. Hundreds of businesses had been destroyed, and entire subdivisions were wiped off the map. Cars were found upside down in fields. Pieces of homes were discovered dozens of miles away from where they once stood. FEMA began coordinating with state officials to provide federal disaster aid. Families were given temporary housing assistance and financial support for rebuilding. Insurance companies faced a record number of claims. Recovery would be a long, difficult process. Even amid the devastation, moments of hope stood out. Pets were reunited with owners. Individuals were pulled alive from collapsed structures days after the tornado hit. Communities came together in powerful ways, cooking meals, raising funds, and helping strangers. The storm had taken a terrible toll, but it also revealed the resilience of the people who endured it. In the months and years following the May 3, 1999 tornado, the scars it left behind remained visible in both the landscape and the people. While many neighborhoods slowly began rebuilding, some areas never fully recovered. Entire subdivisions were reimagined with stronger construction standards. New homes were built with reinforced storm shelters or underground safe rooms, something that became more common throughout central Oklahoma. The disaster prompted changes at both the local and national level. Building codes in tornado-prone areas were reviewed and updated. Schools began investing in safe rooms and improving their emergency preparedness plans, and public awareness campaigns educated people on how to protect themselves during severe weather. The phrase "get underground" became a common part of the vocabulary in Oklahoma homes. Meteorologists and emergency managers used the event as a case study to improve future warnings. The success of the early alert system, which gave residents over 30 minutes of lead time, was a major focus. It demonstrated how vital advanced technology and clear communication could be in saving lives. Local TV stations, weather apps, and NOAA weather radios became even more important tools for staying safe during storm season. For many survivors, the emotional effects lasted far longer than the physical cleanup. Some developed symptoms of post-traumatic stress, especially children who had taken shelter while their homes were torn apart above them. Counseling services were offered across the region, and support groups formed to help people heal. Stories of bravery, loss, and survival were shared at memorials and anniversary events. The tornado also had a lasting impact on how the world viewed extreme weather in the United States. It became one of the most studied tornadoes in history. Scientists analyzed its path, wind speeds, and damage to better understand how such powerful storms form and behave. New radar systems and storm tracking software were developed with lessons learned from that day. Several documentaries and books have been produced to preserve the memories of those affected. Monuments were built in Bridge Creek and more to honor the lives lost. Each year on May 3rd, people gather to reflect and pay tribute. It's not just a day of mourning, it is a day of remembrance, strength, and community. Despite all that was lost, the people of Oklahoma rebuilt with determination. They carried on, not by forgetting the storm, but by learning from it. The May 3rd tornado changed how the country prepares for disasters. It left behind a powerful legacy, one of survival, resilience, and the enduring spirit of those who lived through one of the most violent tornadoes in recorded history.